Hello again, it's Jess or JashiiCorrin, and today we're going to be having a closer look at my travel bullet journal. This video was requested by a couple of people on Instagram and YouTube after I first mentioned my travel journal in the video I had about my 4 different journals. If you hadn't already checked that one out and were curious, there's a link to that one in the cards above. For my travel journal, I'm using a pink medium-sized dot grid LT 1917. I've separated this journal into 2 main parts, so I have the front of journal pages, which is general information related to travel, and then the rest of my journal is free for anything that I want to take down about each trip. As in any of my journals, I first have my index, and then the first real page is dedicated to the places I want to travel. As you can see, this is looking a little bit blank, so let's jot down a few places now. Although I've just written this list in the order that I could think of the places, you can also be a little bit more methodical in your approach and do these either alphabetically or by continent maybe, to make them a little easier to pull out of the page. After this, I have my blank world map, which I can use to colour in the countries that I've already visited. For this page, I didn't really want the title to be something regular like World Map, so instead I used this quote that says, "The world is a book, and those who do not travel read only one page." I really loved this quote and thought it was super fitting to have on a spread like this. As you can see, for the countries I've travelled to, we have Australia, New Zealand, Vietnam and Cambodia, Japan, and England. There were no lines to show the border of England here, so I had to guesstimate a little when filling it in. I think that this map is a really nice visual way to summarise where in the world I've been. As you can probably tell, to include this map in my journal, I've just printed it off on some A4 paper and then cut it to size and stuck it in with some double-sided tape. I know some people prefer the look of only having hand-drawn images in their journal, so a very blank map like this one can be easy to trace rather than having a map with a lot of detail and colour. Although I only have a world map in my journal, you can always have maps of certain countries in particular. So for example, if you are interested in visiting all 50 states of the USA, then it might be beneficial to have a larger map that actually shows the state borders. Something really important to pay attention to when finding a map like this for your journal is making sure that countries don't get left off. Any Kiwi will tell you that the number of maps which don't include New Zealand is a huge pet peeve. After this, I have my master packing and master planning lists, where I've written out all of the things I may have to bring when I travel, regardless of where I'm going, and all of the things I might have to do when planning a trip. This master packing list is super helpful for when I want to start planning the lists I'm using for specific trips. Although mine is really just a one-use list if I was to ever actually tick things off here, one way you can make this a multi-use list would be to have just one column down the side for all your items, and then each column after that could be used for separate trips. This would mean that you don't have to write your list out again for every trip that you take. Another way that people do this is by having the list of things next to a column that they've covered with sellotape. This means that they can write on the sellotape with an erasable pen and wipe it off after every trip. Sadly, I thought of these ideas after I'd actually written my list, so what I do for every trip is actually write a new one out using this list as inspiration. For my master planning list, this one I haven't actually gotten much use out of yet, just because since making this journal, I haven't taken many major trips that really need this much consideration. What this page shows, however, is a general timeline of events to do when planning a trip away. So we start with actually making some money so you can go places, then considering when and where you're going, and who you're going to take with you. After this, it would be good to do some research about your destination and find any deals that might help you make the trip a little bit less expensive. After that, you need to book your transport and accommodation, and then consider any visas or vaccines you might need depending on where you're going. Then it's time to consider the experiences you're actually going to want to have on your trip, and make sure that you book any special ones in. As you get closer to your travel dates, it's probably wise to do a little more saving and then make a countdown so you can get super excited about it. After packing, it's then time to depart, getting away and having a whole heap of fun. Although this isn't necessarily a must-follow order, It does mean I know the things that I should be considering before going on a trip. The last page in my front of journal has been left here so I can eventually make a list of last minute things to consider. The intention for this page is to have it separated into 3 separate sections. So the week before I leave, the day before I leave, and then just before I leave. This list will contain things like, have I organised someone to collect the mail when I'm away? Or have I double checked that I have my passport? And other things that might play on your mind on the way to the airport. By having all of these things written down, I'm hoping it will make the start of my future trips a little less stressful. After all of my front of journal information, then we're straight on into the pages I have for each of the trips I've taken since starting this journal. For each trip, I like to use a pre-decided colour theme so I only have to take the matching pens and stickers with me, rather than my whole stash. For each trip, I have a splash page, a page for the details of the trip, a loose itinerary, and then after this, just pages for what I did each day. I like to decorate these pages with the stickers I bought, as well as any flat-laying mementos that I collect while I'm away. On my first trip, I wanted to do a small review, just so that I could consider some of the things that I took that weren't really that useful, some of the things I didn't pack that I really should have, and then the things that I did take that ended up being the most valuable. I also briefly considered the mode of transport we had used for that trip, and the positives and negatives of this. This review isn't something I've done for every trip, but I do think it's valuable to include some lessons learned in my journal, so I don't make the same mistakes or similar in my future travels. You'll also see that some of these pages I never ended up filling in, and that's because I was probably having too much fun on holidays, or I didn't end up finishing it when I got back to the madness of everyday life. You'll see that I even left some pages with the intentions of coming back and filling them in, but it just never happened. Something new that I tried for this trip was a page of funny moments, where I could write down some of the things that made us really laugh when we went to Napier. The only problem with this page was that it was already full by the first day, so I instead decided to just include any future ones in my daily logs in the travel diary section. You'll probably also notice that a lot of my trips are to Melbourne, and this is because I'm originally from Melbourne and I like to take 1 or 2 trips there to visit my family each year. On this trip, I wanted to see how often I used each of the items I bought with me, so I initially wrote down all of the items on the side so that I could check them off as I packed them, and also made sure to include the amount of items I actually took. Then whenever I used them on my trip, I could put a tick next to them under each of the days that we were away. This gave me a really clear indication of the things that I did and didn't use while I was there. So for example, I made sure to pack my makeup, but didn't actually end up using it at all for the entire trip. The dots next to some of these ticks indicate that it was the first time that I used that item. So in this row here for tops, you can see that I have 4 dots, which indicates that I only used 4 out of the 6 tops that I actually bought with me. Just before you look into this page a little too much and were concerned about my reuse of underwear, for this trip I was actually at home with my family and had access to a washing machine. So these days here are not me just reusing underwear that I haven't cleaned. I also don't include every trip in this journal. Between this last trip and this one here, which was my most recent one, I also had another trip to Melbourne. On that trip, I didn't really want to take my travel journal with me, as it was a very low-key type holiday, which was really just to see my family and hang out with them. Nothing super extraordinary happened, so I didn't want the pressure of having to fill out full trip details and such. For this most recent trip, you can see that I didn't end up filling out some of the details for all of the days that I was there. And although I do have the intention of going back at some stage and filling it in, it may just be one of the ones that doesn't end up quite getting finished off. Something that I would like to start doing is incorporating some photos into my travel journal. They say that a picture's worth 1,000 words, so why not cut down on the writing that you have to do by including those? I'd also love to know if any of you are thinking of making a travel journal or already have one. What kinds of spreads do you guys put in there and how do you lay it out? If you had any images or ideas that you wouldn't mind sharing, make sure to drop them in the comments section below. Thank you for watching. If you liked today's video, please do make sure to give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe to my channel to see the videos I release every Thursday and Sunday. Until next time, bye!